What if everything you believe is real is just a distraction? What if your identity, your name, your story, your memories were just a carefully constructed fantasy? And what if everything you believe to be real was just a distraction? What if your identity, your name, your history, your memories were all a carefully constructed fantasy? And what if the silence you avoid was actually the only voice telling the truth? The truth is, there is no one to wake up, and when you realize that, you wake up. Alan Watts. At some point, we all feel like strangers in our own lives. We live in silent apartments, make lists, follow routines. But deep down, in a place we barely dare to name, something is unsettling us. An uncomfortable feeling that we are sleepwalking, that there is a reality that isn't being seen, that we are interpreting the world and ourselves from a script we never wrote. This video is for you, who has looked in the mirror and asked, "Who am I really?" For you, who is tired of collecting motivational quotes while feeling something essential is still missing. We won't provide easy answers here. We will open cracks because consciousness escapes through the cracks. And with the help of the restless mind of Alan Watts, we will unthread the tapestry of beliefs, thoughts, and illusions that keep us hypnotized. This is not comfortable content about spirituality. It is about waking up from a collective trance, even if it means losing everything you thought you knew. In each chapter, you will be guided by reflections that don't just inform, they transform. We will walk through the fog of the ego, face the void, and touch the present as if for the very first time. And perhaps, just perhaps, you will remember what you always were before the world told you who you should be. We are not here to convince you of anything. We are here to remind you of what you already know but have forgotten. Prepare yourself. Reality is about to look different, or perhaps it will finally reveal itself as it always was. There is something profoundly tragic and almost comical in the way we learn to see the world, as if everything came with a label before it was even felt. Look around you. You see a chair, a wall, a plant. But did you truly see it? Alan Watts used to say that most people don't see the world. They see what they think about the world, the mental image, the concept, the name, the utility, the judgment. And in this subtle game of substitution, reality is pushed back, a whisper drowned out by conceptual shouts. We don't see the tree, we see the word tree. We think oak, wood, shade, leaf, landscape. But when was the last time you truly looked at a tree without thinking about it? That is the core of the illusion. We confuse the map with the territory. We mistake the menu for the banquet. The mind, that compulsive narrator living within us, doesn't just tell us stories about the world. It takes us away from it. The cruelest part is that this starts early. Watch a child in front of a butterfly. They kneel down, silent, mesmerized by the dance of its wings. There are no words, no separation. The child is the moment. But immediately the adult arrives. That's a butterfly, honey. Pretty, isn't it? Blue. And just like that, the spell is broken. We substitute mystery with definition. We educate for understanding, not for contemplation. And the more we understand, the less we see. Watts called this a trance, a collective hypnosis reinforced by centuries of thought, culture, language, and religion. An invisible and therefore dangerous lens that filters everything we perceive. The result: we live surrounded by life but separated from it. The world pulses, but we are locked inside our heads. Have you noticed how rarely you are truly here? The body is present, but the mind is stuck in a yesterday that's over or a tomorrow that hasn't arrived. Reality passes by, and we are distracted by the narrative. This is the great irony of spiritual awakening. It doesn't reveal something new. It removes what is extra. The awakened person doesn't see secret dimensions or invisible portals. They see what was always there, but free from interpretation. Awakening is, in fact, a deconditioning, an unlearning, a brutal yet sweet return to reality without makeup. Have you ever had a moment like that? An afternoon where the sky looked bluer than ever, a pain so intense that everything stopped and only the raw sensation remained? Or perhaps in love, when the other person's touch silenced the world. These brief glimpses are cracks in the dream, but then the ego returns. That was special. I should try to repeat it. And just like that, presence becomes memory. The now becomes expectation. The ego is a master at reducing the infinite to the familiar. And the familiar, though comfortable, is a prison. Watts said, "The spiritually awakened person is not someone with mystical powers. It's someone who has finally stopped confusing their ideas about reality with reality itself." Think about this. If you can observe your thoughts, then you are not the thoughts. You are the one observing. And when you truly start observing, something shifts. The wall is no longer just a wall. The chair is no longer just an object. The world gains depth, texture, and presence. Because for the first time, you are not interpreting, you are seeing. The philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti said that observing without evaluating is the highest form of intelligence. It sounds simple, but it is a revolution, because we were taught to judge everything: pretty, ugly, useful, useless, good, bad. But the awakened person leaves the courtroom. They simply are. And in doing so, they see the real. Do you know that moment when everything effortlessly silences? No searching, no seeking, no explanation, and you feel that nothing is missing? Right there, even if it lasts seconds, you approached what most people never perceive. The world is, and that is enough. You don't need to travel to India or fast for 40 days in the desert. It is enough to pause, to quiet down, to observe without naming, to see without translating. And in that space between one thought and the next, you find the world again. Or better yet, the world finally finds you. Before continuing with the content, have you noticed that the more you break down, the less people respect you? The issue isn't feeling. It's letting feelings dictate your actions. Most people normalize blowing up, giving up, or making excuses, but none of that generates respect. What does generate it is the control, the presence, and the coolness of someone who knows exactly who they are. There is a real way to develop that, and we explain it in a direct video. No beating around the bush, just what really works. If you want to watch it, scan the code on the screen, or click the link in the description or the pinned first comment. Have you ever wondered where that feeling of separation comes from? That constant impression that you are someone in here observing a world out there? That you who thinks, judges, plans, desires, remembers? That you who seems to live behind the eyes, as if locked in a small control center inside the head? Well, that feeling is the mind's most sophisticated trick. A trick so well executed that most people live and die without even suspecting the illusion. Alan Watts called it the encapsulated ego, the belief that we are an isolated entity, locked inside the skin, separated from the rest of the universe. But what if that was just a construct, a convincing story, but ultimately only a story? The mind creates an internal narrator, and that narrator, with its familiar voice, comments on everything. I like this, I don't like that, I'm afraid, I want more. It is incessant, and because we hear that voice all the time, we believe that voice is us. But here's the point. If you can observe that voice, then you are not that voice. If you can witness the thoughts and see them come and go, then there is something in you that precedes thought, something silent, something vast. Watts said, "The awakened person realizes they are not the character in the book, but the blank pages where the whole story is being written. You are not the content of consciousness, you are consciousness itself. And when this truth begins to insinuate itself, everything collapses. The name they gave you, the story you told yourself, the traumas, the dreams, all of it loses solidity. You begin to realize that it is only a way of appearing in the world, but not who you truly are. Imagine you lived your whole life believing you were the image reflected in a mirror. Spiritual awakening is realizing that you are the mirror. That is why the ego is so afraid of silence, because it disappears in the silence. And what remains is not the void we imagined, but a living, vibrant space, full of everything. Have you experienced that without knowing it? In a moment of beauty, of ecstasy, of shock, or of intense pain, when everything stopped, when for a second you weren't thinking life, you were life. But then the narrator returns. Wow, that was incredible. I want to feel that again. And by trying to repeat it, you push it away. The paradox is cruel. The self that wants to wake up is exactly the one that needs to disappear. That you who seeks enlightenment is the cloud covering the clear sky that is already present. And it is not about eliminating the ego like pulling a weed. It is not about destroying the personality or becoming someone neutral, apathetic, or spiritualized. Awakening is not a reform of the ego. It is the recognition that you were never the ego. Watts said that the separate self is a cultural hallucination, a myth we learned so well that we turned it into identity. But the reality is that you are not an isolated entity trying to control life. You are life itself, experiencing itself through this momentary form. Just as the wave is not separate from the ocean, you are not separate from the whole. And when you realize this, there is a deep relief, a type of surrender that is not defeat, but a homecoming. Fear begins to dissolve because fear is born from separation. Fear of death, fear of loss, fear of not being enough. But if there is no separation, what are you afraid of? Life continues with its highs and lows, but now you are less identified with the drama. You begin to see that it is possible to be sad without being the sadness, to be afraid without being the fear, to be angry without being the rage. You become the space where those emotions come and go, and that changes everything. Suddenly the other person is no longer an enemy, because you recognize in their eyes the same consciousness playing the same game of pretending to be someone. You look around, and nothing seems out of place. Chaos has rhythm, pain has wisdom, silence shouts. And then something surprising happens. You stop trying to improve yourself. You stop striving to be a better, more enlightened, or more awakened person. And in that abandonment, presence settles in. You return to being like a child looking at the rain, without thinking, without judging, without wanting, just being. And that is enough. It is not about becoming something. It is about recognizing what you always were before any name, history, or thought. Consciousness recognizes itself, and for the first time, you feel whole. Have you ever realized that life does not need you to keep living? While you worry about deadlines, payments, and unanswered messages, your heart keeps beating, your blood keeps circulating, your lungs keep breathing. Digestion, healing, hair growth, everything happens without your interference. And yet, we still believe we are in control. Alan Watts, with his cosmic poet's lucidity, said that we don't live life, we are lived by it, like a wave that is undulated by the ocean. But the ego, of course, detests that idea. It wants to be the master, the responsible one, the author of its own narrative. It believes it thinks, it chooses, it decides. It positions itself as the manager of existence, the great planner of destiny. But what if that idea of control was just another delusion? Look at nature. The way the sun rises and sets every day, the spontaneous growth of plants, the cycles of the seasons, the tides, gestation, the ripening of fruits. There is a silent intelligence that permeates everything, an invisible dance that organizes chaos. Watts said, The same energy that spins the universe is what is beating in your heart right now. You are not separate from that. You are that. And that changes everything. Because we were taught that consciousness is an exception, a cosmic accident that only occurs in the human brain. But think about it. How could consciousness arise from an unconscious universe? How could life be born from dead matter? It's like trying to extract perfume from a brick. The awakened person sees the absurdity of that logic. They realize that consciousness is not a byproduct. It is the very fabric of reality. Have you ever stopped to contemplate what a seed is? It carries within it a blueprint for a tree, but also the exact moment to germinate, the direction of growth, the wisdom to seek the light, and even the patience to wait for the rain. Who taught the seed that? What manual did it read? What master did it have? It is the same intelligence that guides bird migration, that transforms caterpillars into butterflies, that makes your body regenerate while you sleep. But look, most of us live as if surrounded by dead things, trees as lumber, animals as food, stones as obstacles. We lost the capacity to feel the world as something alive. And that kills us inside, because by reducing everything to resources and utilities, we also reduce ourselves to functions, roles, and tasks. But what if everything was consciousness? What if the wind is not just blowing but being blown? What if the forest breathes? What if the river feels? Not in the human sense, of course, but as their own modes of being, different forms of expression of the same living energy that pulses in you. Awakening is that. Re-enchantment with the world, seeing again as if for the first time. It is the moment when the stone stops being just a stone and becomes a millennia-old mystery. When the sound of the rain is not noise, but a secret language that only silence understands. Watts said that the ego acts as if it were a tourist in the universe, an outsider trying to conquer nature. But there is no separation. You are not in nature, you are nature. You are the cosmos in human form, a piece of the infinite experiencing being finite for a while. And when that perception hits deep, something changes. You begin to move with more lightness, to listen more, to interfere less. You start dancing with life instead of trying to choreograph it. And that dance is spontaneous. It is what you see in the shine of a lover's eyes, in the child playing without looking at the clock, in the dog running for no reason, in the music that gives you goosebumps without explanation. It is not that the intelligence of life belongs to you. You belong to it. And that brings a radical freedom, because you realize that the effort to control everything was actually what was keeping you away from life. You don't have to struggle so hard, not to be accepted, not to be loved, not to succeed. The tree does not need to prove it deserves the sun. The flower does not rehearse blooming. Nature simply is. And you, when you stop pretending to be something else, you also are. Perceiving that is like waking up from a dry dream and entering a world where even the air has a taste. It's when the gaze softens, when touch regains presence, when you walk down the street and feel that everything is moving with you, not around you, but in you. Everything is alive, and the most alive thing is that part of you that quietens down to see. How many times today were you truly here? Not in the superficial sense, body present, mind busy, but truly here, where the feet meet the floor, where the air enters the lungs, where life is happening at this very instant. If you are honest, you might realize that you spent most of the day somewhere else, trapped in memories of what was or drowned in projections of what might be, living among ghosts. Most people live like this, tied to an imaginary line called time. But time, Alan Watts said, is a mental construct, not an absolute reality. The past is a memory happening now. The future is an expectation happening now. The only place where life happens is the now. That's why so many desperately seek spiritual awakening, because intuitively, They feel they are missing something essential, something that always slips away like water through the fingers. But the paradox is cruel. What slips away is precisely what has never left the place. The now is not absent. It is so present that it becomes invisible. Watts compared time to music. There is no point in speeding up a melody just to reach the end. The value of music is in listening to it, note by note. But we live like someone who wants to skip the notes, like someone accelerating existence hoping to find peace on the last page. Psychological time is a prison. In it, the past becomes guilt, the future anxiety, and the present a means to an end. But the truth is brutal. The present is all that exists, and when you are not in it, you are absent from your own life. Have you ever seen someone drink coffee and not taste it? Have you talked to someone who was there but wasn't there? Have you been that person? All of us have been. All of us are, much of the time, and that is exhausting. It is exhausting because being dragged by thoughts is like trying to walk with an anchor tied to your chest. It is exhausting because time demands effort. Being present demands surrender. But why is it so hard to simply be? Because the ego does not exist in the now. It lives on stories, on pasts that reinforce its identity, on futures that promise completeness. Being in the present is like deactivating the character, and that is scary. That is why being quiet is so uncomfortable for so many. In the silence, there is no distraction, no drama. There is only this moment, raw, naked, unadorned. But awakening happens precisely there. When you stop running, when you stop reaching, when you surrender without guarantees, without results. And then something happens. The now opens up, not as an instant, but as a space, a silent immensity where everything appears and disappears. You feel the wind as never before. The sound of your breath seems to come from another universe. Colors gain texture, noises become music. You begin to notice that you never needed much to feel everything, and even more, you realize that nothing is missing, because the now is always complete. It is not a place of arrival. It is the home you never left. You just forgot. Watts said that living in the now is not abandoning the past or the future. It is seeing clearly that they only exist here. The problem is not remembering or planning, but identifying with that. Forgetting that all of that is thought, and thought happens now. Pay close attention to what you are feeling right now. Not what you think you feel, but what is there, unfiltered, unnamed. The awakened person inhabits that place, not because they learned the perfect technique, but because they unlearned how to run away. They do not seek a special experience. They see the special in the ordinary. They eat, walk, breathe, and that is enough because they are there, whole, surrendered. And perhaps you think, but the now is uncomfortable, it is empty, it is confusing. Yes, sometimes it is, but it is true. And truth, even when uncomfortable, liberates. Being in the present does not guarantee euphoria, it guarantees presence. And presence has a beauty that does not need to shout. It is like a candle lit in the darkness, discreet, but impossible to ignore. Time is a dream, and most people are dreaming that they are alive. The awakened person has woken up, not into something extraordinary, but into the extraordinary nature of the common. And if you stop right now, sit in silence and listen, not with your ears, but with your being, perhaps you will perceive what has always been here. This moment is everything, and in this moment, you are everything. Who are you when no one is watching you? Who are you when your name is forgotten? When the story is untold? When the mirror is covered and the world stops calling you? Most people never dare to face that question head-on because it unmasks. It threatens everything we call self. But Alan Watts, with his gentle courage, invites us precisely to go into that abyss, to look the character in the eye, and instead of reinforcing it, let it fall. The feeling of being a separate ego that fixed, constant I, is a fiction, a mask so firmly stuck that we forget it is not the face. From childhood, we were taught to construct this identity like building armor. I am John. I am shy. I am an engineer. I am funny. I am traumas, conquests, pains, titles, labels, scars. But what if all that was just the surface of the wave? What if the true you was what observes the character, but does not confuse itself with it? That is the revelation that changes everything, and which is also deeply frightening, because the ego is addicted to permanence. It wants to be something. It wants to know. It wants to control. It needs a form, even if that form hurts. But awakened consciousness has no form. It is without needing to be anything specific. It is the stage, not the actor. When that understanding begins to dawn, not as theory but as direct experience, a silence happens inside. It is not an empty silence. It is a full silence, full of presence, full of something that cannot be explained, but that you recognize as more real than everything you tried to be. It is in that silence that fear dissolves, because fear is born from the idea that I can be hurt, abandoned, rejected, forgotten. But if that self is just a mask, what is left to be threatened? Have you noticed that everything we fear losing only exists as a thought? Reputation, image, control, the future, even the past, they are mental constructs sustained by constant effort. And when you stop feeding that identity, it dissolves like mist under the sun. And what remains is something no word can reach. Watt said that awakening is not becoming something better, but realizing that you never were what you thought you were. And that understanding, curiously, does not make you apathetic. On the contrary, it liberates you, because without the burden of maintaining an identity, you can be anything. You can laugh with more lightness, love without possessing, create without obsession, let go of old ideas like changing clothes. It is like becoming a child again, but now with the wisdom of someone who has already seen the other side. You start playing the game of life knowing it is a game, and for that very reason, you play better, with more presence, more grace, more compassion. The other person ceases to be a threat because deep down, there is no other. What there are different expressions of the same consciousness, fragments dancing in different forms, but made of the same light. And when you truly see that, judgment disappears. Comparison loses meaning. Loneliness dissolves, not because you became better, but because you stopped seeing yourself as separate. It is here that fear finally quiets down. Not because the danger disappeared, not because life became a garden of flowers, but because you became space. And space does not resist. It allows, it welcomes, it contains. Pain may arrive, loss may occur, uncertainty may knock at the door, but the space remains untouched, and you are that space. The same one that observes thoughts come and go, the same one that listens to the world without judging, the same one that remains when everything else changes. This is the truth that the spiritually awakened see. They are not someone, they are the very seeing. They don't have answers, but they also don't have so many questions, because they are no longer trying to get somewhere. They realized they never left. And perhaps you, in silence, right where you are, already know it too. Because deep down, you were never you. Never the name, the fear, the title, the guilt, the success. You are what is reading these words right now, feeling your breath. You are consciousness. And that is enough. Perhaps now you are in silence, but not an empty or uncomfortable silence. A silence that pulses, a silence full of presence, a silence that does not ask for explanations, it only invites you to be. If you made it this far, it was not out of simple curiosity, it was because in some way something in you already knew it, already felt it. Even if you couldn't name it, even if the mind resisted, the heart was already whispering, there is something more. And perhaps that something more is not something new. Perhaps it is just the removal of what you never were, the fading of the mask, the end of the performance. Throughout life, we learned to accumulate concepts, ideas, identities, goals, and anxieties, as if each addition brought us closer to who we should be. But what if the path was not about accumulating, but about letting go? What if you were whole, and all that was missing was to remember? That remembering does not come as a thought. It comes as a soft landing, a certainty without words, like someone who, after years of wandering, recognizes the taste of their own home. Spiritual awakening, as Alan Watts showed us, is not a spectacular explosion or a hidden miracle. It is often a subtle click, a pause between thoughts, an instant when you look at a tree, a face, a sky, and nothing needs to be different. And in that instant, you understand. You were never the thinker, never the name, never the narrative you repeated before sleep. You are the space between the thoughts. You are the consciousness that perceives. You are the stage where life dances with all its pains, loves, falls, and rebirths. Reality is not a story to be told. It is a mystery to be lived. And the more you try to capture it with words, the more it slips away. But if you just look, listen, and feel, it reveals itself. Perhaps the greatest act of courage today is not to shout for attention, but to sit in silence, not to win arguments, but to unlearn certainties. Perhaps awakening is not becoming enlightened, but allowing yourself to be without effort, without defense, without pretense. Because in the end, what the spiritually awakened see is not a new world. It is this same world without the lenses of the ego. The noise continues, the pain still exists. But now there is a silent background that does not move, like the sky behind the clouds, like the ocean beneath the storm. That background is you. And when you recognize that, fear no longer rules, control no longer locks you in, and time no longer runs. It dances. You begin to walk differently, no longer in search but in presence, like someone walking with eyes open and heart disarmed. Nothing changed, but you stopped resisting what is. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is the miracle we were looking for. You know, while writing this script, I remembered a very specific night in my life. One of those dawns where everything seems absolutely silent, but something is screaming inside. I was alone, lying down, with one of those anxieties you cannot explain. A strange feeling of living well on the outside, but being completely lost on the inside. I grabbed my phone, as always, looking for a distraction, but for some strange, or perhaps not so strange, reason, a video of Alan Watts appeared. He started with that voice of his, half laugh, half abyss. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe looking at itself. That hit me like a punch and a hug at the same time, not because I understood everything immediately, but because for an instant I stopped. I stopped fighting. I stopped trying to fix myself. I stopped believing that I was that broken self. It was in that instant, which perhaps lasted seconds, that I felt alive again, without reason, just present. And perhaps if this video touched you in some way, it is because deep down, you also paused for a few seconds. You already felt that there is something in you that does not need fixing. It just needs to be seen, recognized, breathed. So thank you truly for being here, for opening that space within you, for allowing these words, which are just words after all, to touch something that is beyond words. And if you've realized that feeling less isn't coldness, it's power, don't leave without watching the full content. Just click the link in the description or the pinned first comment to access it now. Now, before this gets too sentimental, Alan Watts would be laughing at me right now, I'll give you one last invitation. If you felt something different with this video, write in the comments what started to quiet down inside you. And of course, if you liked it, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, or just ignore all that and go look at a tree for real? By the way, as this video ends, 2 others will appear here on the screen, but I won't tell you what they are about, because honestly, maybe it is not about the topic. Maybe it is about the right moment to hear something you didn't know you needed. Tap one of them and see. Or don't tap it. Just breathe. You are already here, and that is enough.